smell of burning flesh reaches the adventurer's nostrils from over a mile away. The once quiet village of Kromp, where the adventurers started from, has now been burned to the ground, ransacked by pillagers bent on destruction and death. What is up, YouTube? This is Lair. I'm the crafter. This is the Lair. It's really just a garage, but we're going to be building these awesome little burning fire markers made popular by the Black Magic Craft channel. It's where you kind of create this cool little base, a flickering Tealight, you drop that in. You got access to the switch and battery compartment, so you can change those and turn those on and off at your leisure. I really like the factory-made aspect of this. There's some easier ways to do this using PVA glue and toilet paper that Black Magic Craft outlines, and we're going to be using some of the other techniques that he introduced as well. So crack a beer, hang out, and let's get to crafting. So we have the 3D models here. This is the first base that I did. It was a little too shallow, I thought at the time. The Tealight actually stuck out above it. I've got versions with skeletons and without. This is the version 2 of the base. It's actually taller, a little bit more cone-shaped. More on that later. Here are some of the charred wooden planks. You can really see some of this burning, smoldering texture that I applied. This really shows up in the dry brushing, and it looked awesome. It's probably my favorite part of the build. So just popping this into my homemade little curing station. Just a small UV light and some tin foil. Honestly, this thing is too small. I'm going to rebuild it. Look at those babies getting a nice tan. Oh yeah. So these are just some flickering orange LED tea lights. I got a pack of about 6 of these for, I want to say, $10. Going through, adding some hot glue, just going to support those in there. The tea light actually rests comfortably on this little lip at the bottom of the base. This is just for some added security, and I'm going to be adding some sculptor mold in the next steps, so this will help keep these secured in place. Now, I had mentioned in the 3D modeling process, this is that first base that I had printed. You can see how the Tealight is sticking out. I actually ended up really liking this base almost better than the larger, more cone-shaped mounds. I wish I printed more of the original R1. You'll be able to see in the final product the accessories just had a better time sitting on top of that mound. Just going through here using some DAS air hardening clay. This stuff is great. You didn't need too much for this, and I'm just kind of sealing up the seam between the Tealight and the 3D printed base. Now for this one, again, the Tealight sticks out quite a bit, so I had to add quite a bit more clay to it. It really turned out better. Always remember to seal up your clay before moving on to the next step. In case you leave it out, you don't want that stuff hardening up. Next, we're going to be using some of this polyfill stuffing. I'm going to get this painted black, concentrating most of the paint towards the bottom and leaving the top a little bit lighter. That gives it a smokier, more realistic effect. Okay, I began to lay out all the 3D printed accessories. There's quite a bit here from the 5 different flaming debris piles I printed. Going to hit that all with a quick coat of some flat black paint. This is cheap spray paint. Honestly, I don't use really expensive primers for this just because of the amount. I have a fan turned on, and I'm going to let these dry and air out the room. Okay, from there we add a bunch of PVA glue, and I found it better to really kind of glob the glue on, and I'm using some construction sand for this. So this isn't like washed play sand that you'd find in a sandbox. This is quite a lot of different sized pebbles and stones in it. It creates a pretty cool gravelly effect, and once we cover all of this in black Mod Podge, it's really going to help sell the effect of this kind of like crumbled stone, cobblestone walls, these sorts of things. So by applying a liberal coat of glue, it really helps some of these larger stones stick to these bases. That's something I didn't do on the first base, but from there, just go back and touch them up. Well, now it's time to start the painting process on all our little add-ons. We've got these charred boards, little tiny curled up skeletons. We've got spears with banners sticking out of them, so we can stick these into the ground. We've got some like wooden trusses and fallen roof panels, all these charred boards. I think how I'm gonna go about this is paint most of these a very, very light, rough coat of brown. I wanted to try some of these charred boards with a bit of red on the bottom and then dry brush with black on top to see if I can get like a glowing inner effect on it, as if like charred, burning, smoldering wood gets. So we might give that a try on a couple of these and see how that turns out. But I'm excited to get in here, get painting, and get assembling. So I've got all those pieces laid out, and I'm kind of thinking that this might not actually be enough. I'm going to use some coffee stir sticks to create some longer pieces and some kind of like filler wooden planks, and I can kind of use these as my like beauty or top objects. So I'm gonna take some coffee sticks, I'm gonna start slicing those down and spray paint those up black, and then we'll get to painting. Just whittling up some of these craft sticks here. It's important to kind of make these irregular. I went through with an X-Acto blade and kind of shaved those down to give it kind of like a rough cut hewn effect, just to make it not look like craft sticks. Quick coat of some black paint. Now a quick dry brush with brown. Not being too precious with this paint. I know I'm going to be covering up quite a bit of this. I just wanted to get some brown tones underneath some of the rest of the painting effects we're going to do. From here, cover in a coat of 50/50 PVA glue to water mixture, and this will just help all of those little stones and pebbles dry up, make sure the LED still works, and let those dry overnight. Which brings us into our next segment, the beer of the build. Founders All Day IPA, a nice refreshing 4.5% alcohol by volume beer. Good for drinking and not getting too drunk to craft. Okay, we're back for day 2 of this build. I have let the bases kind of dry up overnight. It seems to have worked well. The sand is now stuck to these Tealight holders. I'm going to coat these in black Mod Podge. It's going to be about 35% black paint to Mod Podge mixture. And while those are drying, I'm going to quickly spray the polyester filling with some varnish to kind of stiffen those up a little bit more. And a coat of black Mod Podge. I'm deciding to leave these little flame bits on, these plastic flame shrouds that will help create a mask, I was thinking, and prevent me from painting over the LED itself. I'll remove these at a later step. So I'm going to be putting an undercoat of some orange fiery colors. I'm really glad I did this step. This is probably one of my favorite parts of the build. I'll be dry brushing some more colors on top of this. So we've let these things dry for a little while. The Mod Podge has hardened up, and I've got all these kind of crappier wood planks that we made last night. So I'm going to attempt to lay these out and see how that's looking. I might put a coat of black Mod Podge on these. Not exactly sure what I want to do with that. I'm also going to attempt to take these little like flame caps off the bases. They do rotate easily. I was worried that the Mod Podge might like glue them in place, but it seems like that's going to be no trouble to remove. I think it might be easier to remove these now, affix these and paint them black where necessary. I'm really not sure, so I'm going back and forth. You might see my process kind of change a little bit. Well, off camera, I just attempted to remove this, and it did not go so well. I'm going to do my best to get this back in place. I'm going to have to think about how I get this cap off. I think I may just have to cut it using my Olfa knife. I'm going to give that a go and report back. I'm attempting to use an Olfa knife here. It didn't really work great, so I went back to the pliers and just did a twisting motion instead of a pulling motion, and that was able to get those caps right off. Just going to repeat that process for the other Tealights here and remove the rest of those. After this, I'm going to start using some of those coffee stir sticks that I had painted up and whittled down. So I'm trying to create essentially like a little bit of a frame so I can lay some of the more detailed accessories on top. I placed those down using some Arlene's tacky glue. It worked okay. I believe I switched to some hot glue for this, just so it would dry faster and I would deal with those kind of flyaways later. I'm going through here and painting up some of those debris pieces. I'm using coats of black. I'll go over that with a couple shades of light gray. I actually have 3 different shades of light gray. These are all just kind of eyeballing the mixture of paint, but I just wanted to have a few varieties. Again, working my way dark to light. And again, I was just being pretty quick with this process. I wasn't really worried about how perfect my paint job would be. Going back and adding in some of those little framing coffee stir sticks and giving those a coat of black paint. The spray paint I had hit them with, I missed a few spots. I wasn't very thorough about it, but just a couple quick coats with some black paint here, and I have a decent frame. I decided to use some yellow paint to create almost like some object source lighting and dry brush around the LED flame. I'm actually really unsatisfied with the way this turned out, and I should have spent more time on this step. I may go back and kind of redo this by pulling up some of the polyester filling and repainting that, either with an airbrush or something like that, to get that object-based, object source lighting effect achieved, but it just really didn't turn out great here, and I kind of regret using the yellow. Here is the bases with all of their little accessories added. I used a mix of hot glue and tacky glue to apply those. Once those dry up and are sealed, I'm going to give everything a coat of some pretty bright white highlights, and this is just a dry brush here. It really makes everything look like it's covered in a layer of kind of like fallen ash. And one of my favorite parts about this build, which I'll show in a moment, is the yellow-orange glowing interiors of some of these burned up timbers. I think that effect really turned out amazing, and it's easily my favorite part of this build. So whenever I do any kind of ruins, I'm definitely going to be reprinting out some of these charred boards, because that texture just couldn't be replicated by carving or using a wire brush. It would just take too much time. Okay, now that those are dried, I'm applying some of the polyester filling, just using hot glue again, being careful about some of my flyaways and tearing those out where necessary. I also kind of pinched up some of the polyester fill in the center to create like almost a little bowl shape, like a pinch pot shape, and that let the light travel further up into the stuffing itself. That about wraps this build up. I'm really happy with the way these turned out. I love all the little added details, the burned up skeletons and charred boards. It really helps seal this effect. So that about wraps it up for this build. These things are looking awesome. I love all the little details, the burning kind of ember singed orange that you can see through the charred wooden beams. I think that came out great. I love the little skeletons trying to clamber out of the burning debris here. If you want to build this yourself, I'm going to make the STL files available for download. You can try out a couple of these different bases as well as some of these little add-ons that I modeled, so be sure to check that out. If you do decide to make any of these, please send me a message. I would love to see what you guys are making. This is the craft layer. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a like. If you like this type of content, be sure to subscribe. I'm going to be making videos as often as possible, giving away STL files as often as possible. So stick around and we'll see you next time. Thanks.